Question 1. Cost-benefit analysis shows that implementing a more streamlined, shorter driver testing procedure in Newfoundland and Labrador could significantly increase the number of applicants processed daily. Considering the regulatory framework governing driver licensing in the province, which of the following approaches best balances efficiency with the imperative of public safety? Option A. Implement a system where only a portion of the driving test is observed, with the remaining assessment based on a written questionnaire about driving scenarios. Option B. Maintain the current comprehensive testing protocol, ensuring each candidate receives a full evaluation of their driving skills and adherence to traffic laws, even if it means processing fewer applicants per day. Option C. Introduce a standardized, shortened testing route and reduced observation checklist to expedite the process, focusing only on critical driving errors. Option D. Allow examiners to use their discretion to significantly shorten the testing duration for candidates who appear confident and experienced, regardless of the standard evaluation criteria. The correct answer is B. Maintain the current comprehensive testing protocol, ensuring each candidate receives a full evaluation of their driving skills and adherence to traffic laws, even if it means processing fewer applicants per day. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate need for efficient road testing with the paramount importance of ensuring driver competency and public safety, as mandated by Newfoundland and Labrador's driver licensing regulations. The pressure to process more applicants quickly can create a temptation to cut corners, which directly conflicts with the legal and ethical obligations of driver examiners. The best approach involves a thorough and standardized evaluation process that adheres strictly to the Newfoundland and Labrador Driver's Handbook and the official testing procedures. This means dedicating sufficient time to each candidate to observe their driving skills, adherence to traffic laws, and decision-making abilities in various road conditions. This approach is correct because it directly fulfills the legal requirement to assess a driver's readiness to operate a vehicle safely on public roads. The Newfoundland and Labrador Highway Traffic Act and associated regulations are designed to protect the public by ensuring only qualified individuals are licensed. A comprehensive evaluation, even if it takes longer, is the only way to meet this statutory obligation and uphold the ethical duty of care examiners owe to all road users. An approach that prioritizes speed over thoroughness by shortening observation periods or overlooking minor errors is ethically and regulatorily flawed. This directly violates the spirit and letter of the licensing laws, which demand a rigorous assessment of a driver's ability to safely navigate public roadways. Such an approach risks issuing licenses to individuals who may not possess the necessary skills or judgment, thereby increasing the likelihood of accidents and endangering the public. This failure to uphold the standards set by the Newfoundland and Labrador Department of Transportation and Infrastructure constitutes a serious breach of professional responsibility. Another incorrect approach would be to deviate from the standardized testing routes and scenarios without proper justification. This introduces an element of unpredictability and bias into the testing process, making it difficult to objectively compare candidates' performance and ensure fairness. It also fails to adequately assess a candidate's ability to handle the diverse situations they will encounter on Newfoundland and Labrador's roads, potentially leading to an incomplete or inaccurate evaluation of their driving competence. The professional decision-making process for examiners should involve a clear understanding of their mandate to ensure public safety through rigorous driver assessment. This requires prioritizing adherence to established testing protocols and standards over any perceived pressure for increased efficiency. Examiners must be empowered to allocate the necessary time for each test, regardless of applicant volume, and to make objective judgments based on observable performance against the defined criteria. When faced with time constraints, the professional response is to advocate for more resources or adjusted scheduling, rather than compromising the integrity of the testing process. Question 2. Cost-benefit analysis shows that adhering to the specific restrictions of the Newfoundland and Labrador Graduated Driver Licensing Program for Class 5-3 driver, such as passenger limits and curfews, is crucial for long-term safety and legal compliance. Considering this, which of the following actions best reflects responsible driving practice for a novice driver in Newfoundland and Labrador? Option A. Strictly follow all passenger limitations and the midnight to 5, a.m. driving curfew as outlined in the Newfoundland and Labrador Graduated Driver Licensing Program. Option B. Rely on the advice of friends who suggest that the passenger restrictions are not strictly enforced after the first year of driving. Option C. Drive friends home after midnight occasionally, assuming that minor infractions are overlooked for new drivers. Option D. Drive with more passengers than permitted if the trip is short and the roads are familiar, as this is a common practice among some drivers. The correct answer is A. Strictly follow all passenger limitations and the midnight to 5:00 a.m. driving curfew as outlined in the Newfoundland and Labrador Graduated Driver Licensing Program. Explanation: the scenario presents a common challenge for new drivers in Newfoundland and Labrador, balancing the desire for independent driving with the legal and safety responsibilities mandated by the province's Graduated Driver Licensing (GDL) program. The core professional challenge lies in understanding and adhering to the specific restrictions and requirements of the GDL program to ensure both personal safety and legal compliance. Misinterpreting or disregarding these rules can lead to serious consequences, including license suspension, fines, and increased insurance premiums, and most importantly, jeopardizing the safety of the driver and others on the road. The best approach involves a thorough understanding and strict adherence to the Newfoundland and Labrador GDL program's restrictions for a Class 5-3 driver. This means recognizing that the driver is still in a probationary period and must comply with all stipulated conditions, such as passenger limitations and the prohibition of driving between midnight and 5:00 a.m., unless specific exceptions apply and are documented. This approach is correct because it directly aligns with the purpose of the GDL program, which is to gradually introduce new drivers to the responsibilities of driving in a controlled environment, thereby reducing the risk of accidents. The Newfoundland and Labrador Highway Traffic Act and associated regulations explicitly outline these restrictions for novice drivers. Ethical considerations also strongly support this approach, as it prioritizes the safety of the driver and the public by following established safety protocols designed to mitigate risks associated with inexperience. An incorrect approach would be to assume that once a certain amount of time has passed since obtaining the license, the restrictions are no longer strictly enforced or can be casually disregarded. This fails to acknowledge the legal framework of the GDL program, which imposes specific timeframes and conditions for progression. Another incorrect approach is to prioritize personal convenience or social pressures over legal requirements, such as driving friends home late at night despite the midnight curfew. This demonstrates a disregard for the law and the safety principles underpinning the GDL program. Finally, relying on anecdotal advice from other drivers who may have bypassed restrictions in the past is a dangerous and unprofessional strategy, as it ignores the official regulations and the potential legal ramifications. Professionals should approach such situations by consulting official sources for information on driver licensing requirements, such as the Newfoundland and Labrador Department of Transportation and Infrastructure's Driver's Handbook or official government websites. They should prioritize understanding the specific conditions and restrictions associated with their current license class and adhere to them diligently. When in doubt, seeking clarification from the licensing authority is the most responsible course of action. This systematic approach ensures compliance, promotes safety, and fosters responsible driving habits. Question 3. The monitoring system demonstrates a pattern of minor deviations in a driver's lane adherence during a recent observation period in Newfoundland and Labrador. Considering the regulatory framework for driver competency, which of the following approaches best optimizes the process while ensuring absolute priority for road safety? Option A. All automated alerts for lane deviations are immediately escalated for mandatory re-examination of the driver without any human review of the underlying data. Option B. Automated alerts are generated for potential issues, triggering a mandatory review by a qualified examiner to assess the context and significance of the deviations before any action is taken. Option C. The system prioritizes processing speed, automatically classifying any driver with a lane deviation alert as requiring immediate remedial training, regardless of the deviation's severity or context. Option D. The monitoring system is configured to only flag drivers for re-examination after a predetermined high threshold of lane deviations is reached, indicating a severe safety risk. The correct answer is B. Automated alerts are generated for potential issues, triggering a mandatory review by a qualified examiner to assess the context and significance of the deviations before any action is taken. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the efficient operation of a monitoring system with the absolute priority of ensuring driver competency and safety on Newfoundland and Labrador roads. The temptation to streamline processes by relying solely on automated alerts without human verification can lead to overlooking critical nuances in driver behavior or system anomalies, potentially compromising public safety and regulatory compliance. Careful judgment is required to integrate technology effectively without sacrificing the human element essential for accurate assessment and decision-making. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a multi-layered approach where automated system alerts serve as an initial flag for potential issues, but are always followed by a thorough human review. This approach aligns with the principles of responsible oversight and due diligence mandated by the Highway Traffic Act of Newfoundland and Labrador, which emphasizes the need for competent and safe drivers. The system's role is to augment, not replace, human judgment. By requiring a qualified examiner to review the data and context before any action is taken, this method ensures that decisions are based on a comprehensive understanding of the driver's performance and any system-generated flags, thereby upholding the highest standards of road safety and regulatory adherence. Incorrect approaches analysis. Relying solely on automated system alerts to flag drivers for immediate re-examination without any human verification is a significant regulatory failure. This approach bypasses the critical human element of assessment, potentially leading to erroneous conclusions and unnecessary administrative burdens for drivers, while failing to adequately address the underlying safety concerns. It neglects the requirement for a nuanced understanding of driving performance that only a human examiner can provide. Implementing a policy that prioritizes system efficiency over the accuracy of driver assessments by automatically escalating all alerts for immediate action demonstrates a disregard for the principles of fairness and due process. This could lead to drivers being subjected to re-examination based on false positives or minor, contextually insignificant deviations, which is not in line with the spirit of promoting safe driving practices as outlined in provincial regulations. Adopting a reactive approach where the monitoring system only flags drivers after a significant number of infractions have accumulated, without proactive monitoring or immediate review of concerning patterns, represents a failure in risk management. This approach is less effective in preventing potential hazards and does not align with the proactive safety measures expected under the Highway Traffic Act of Newfoundland and Labrador. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this field should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes safety and regulatory compliance. This involves understanding the capabilities and limitations of monitoring systems, recognizing the indispensable role of human judgment, and adhering strictly to the legal and ethical obligations of the jurisdiction. A systematic process of alert generation, human verification, contextual analysis, and appropriate action ensures that decisions are informed, fair, and contribute to the overall safety of Newfoundland and Labrador's roadways. Question 4. During the evaluation of a driver's response to feeling unwell and experiencing a significant reduction in their ability to concentrate while operating a vehicle on a highway in Newfoundland and Labrador, which of the following actions best upholds the principles of road safety and compliance with provincial traffic laws? Option A. Continue driving at a slower pace, focusing intensely on the road to compensate for the reduced concentration. Option B. Pull over to the side of the road but keep the engine running while waiting for the feeling to pass. Option C. Safely pull over to the shoulder of the road, turn off the engine, and contact a trusted friend or taxi service for assistance. Option D. Attempt to push through the symptoms and drive to the intended destination without stopping. The correct answer is C. Safely pull over to the shoulder of the road, turn off the engine, and contact a trusted friend or taxi service for assistance. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a driver to balance immediate personal needs with the legal and safety obligations of operating a vehicle in Newfoundland and Labrador. The temptation to prioritize convenience over safety and compliance is a common ethical dilemma for drivers. Careful judgment is required to ensure that all actions taken are in accordance with the Highway Traffic Act of Newfoundland and Labrador and promote road safety. Correct approach analysis. The best professional approach involves immediately ceasing operation of the vehicle in a safe location and contacting the appropriate authorities or services for assistance. This aligns with the fundamental principle of road safety and the legal requirement to operate a vehicle in a condition that does not endanger oneself or others, as stipulated by the Highway Traffic Act of Newfoundland and Labrador. Specifically, Section 172 of the Act addresses impaired driving and operating a vehicle while unfit, implying a duty to stop and seek help if one is not in a fit state to drive. This approach prioritizes public safety and legal compliance above personal convenience. Incorrect approaches analysis. Continuing to drive, even at a reduced speed or with the intention of reaching a destination quickly, is a direct violation of the Highway Traffic Act of Newfoundland and Labrador. This action demonstrates a disregard for the safety of other road users and oneself, and could lead to severe legal penalties, including charges for impaired driving or operating a vehicle in an unsafe condition. It fails to acknowledge the potential impairment and the risks associated with it. Pulling over to the side of the road without turning off the engine or taking further action, while seemingly a step towards stopping, is insufficient. The vehicle remains a potential hazard, and the driver's condition has not been addressed. This approach does not resolve the underlying issue of being unfit to drive and could still lead to legal repercussions if observed by law enforcement. Attempting to tough it out and continue driving by focusing harder is a dangerous and irresponsible approach. It ignores the physiological effects of the situation and places an undue burden on the driver's ability to react to changing road conditions. This is ethically unsound and legally precarious, as it directly contravenes the spirit and letter of traffic laws designed to prevent accidents caused by impaired or unfit drivers. Professional reasoning. Professionals in any field, including driving, must prioritize safety and legal compliance. When faced with a situation that compromises their ability to operate safely and legally, the decision-making process should involve 1. Recognizing the risk and potential consequences. 2. Identifying the safest and most legal course of action. 3. Implementing that action promptly. 4. Seeking appropriate assistance if necessary. In this context, acknowledging the impairment and taking immediate steps to stop driving and get help is the only responsible and lawful choice. Question 5. What factors determine the most appropriate and legally compliant response when a driver in Newfoundland and Labrador encounters an unexpected, potentially hazardous object on the roadway ahead? Option A. Continuing at the current speed while honking the horn repeatedly to alert the object to the vehicle's presence. Option B. A thorough assessment of the object's nature, proximity, and the surrounding traffic conditions, followed by a controlled reduction in speed and a decision on evasive action only if safe to do so. Option C. Swerving abruptly to avoid the object without checking mirrors or considering other road users. Option D. An immediate, sharp braking maneuver to stop the vehicle as quickly as possible, regardless of the risk of being rear-ended. The correct answer is B. A thorough assessment of the object's nature, proximity, and the surrounding traffic conditions, followed by a controlled reduction in speed and a decision on evasive action only if safe to do so. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a driver to make a critical decision under pressure that directly impacts road safety and their legal compliance in Newfoundland and Labrador. The driver must assess a complex situation involving a potential hazard and determine the safest and most legally sound course of action, balancing immediate reaction with adherence to traffic laws. The challenge lies in accurately interpreting the situation and applying the correct principles of defensive driving and traffic regulation. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a comprehensive assessment of the situation, prioritizing safety and adherence to the Newfoundland and Labrador Highway Traffic Act. This approach requires the driver to first slow down significantly, observe the situation to understand the nature and proximity of the hazard, e.g., a pedestrian, animal, or other vehicle, and then take appropriate evasive action only if it can be done safely without endangering themselves or others. This aligns with the fundamental principles of defensive driving, which emphasize anticipating potential hazards and reacting cautiously. Specifically, the Highway Traffic Act mandates that drivers must operate their vehicles with due care and attention and avoid actions that could endanger others. Slowing down and assessing the situation before reacting is the most prudent and legally defensible action. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach is to immediately swerve or brake sharply without fully assessing the hazard. This action could lead to losing control of the vehicle, causing a collision with other vehicles, or creating a new hazard. It demonstrates a failure to exercise due care and attention as required by law and a disregard for the potential consequences of an impulsive reaction. Another incorrect approach is to assume the hazard will resolve itself and continue at the same speed. This demonstrates a lack of defensive driving and a failure to anticipate potential dangers. The Highway Traffic Act implies a duty to react to observable hazards, and ignoring a clear potential danger could be construed as negligence if an accident occurs. A further incorrect approach is to honk the horn excessively and continue without slowing. While honking can alert others, it is not a substitute for safe driving practices. It fails to address the potential immediate danger and does not demonstrate the required level of caution and control over the vehicle. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a systematic decision-making process when encountering unexpected situations on the road. This process involves 1. Observation, actively scanning the environment for potential hazards. 2. Identification, recognizing and understanding the nature of the hazard. 3. Prediction, anticipating what might happen next. 4. Decision, choosing the safest and most legally compliant course of action. 5. Execution, implementing the chosen action smoothly and safely. In this scenario, the driver must prioritize observation and identification before making a decision and executing it. Question 6. Quality control measures reveal that a driving instructor in Newfoundland and Labrador is consistently shortening the duration of their on-road assessments for students who express anxiety about the test, often concluding the evaluation after only a brief period of observation in a quiet residential area. What is the most appropriate course of action for the instructor to take to ensure compliance with Newfoundland and Labrador's driver licensing regulations and ethical standards? Option A. Immediately terminate the assessment and advise the student to reschedule once they feel more confident, without completing any significant on-road observation. Option B. Inform the student that due to their anxiety, they are not eligible for a license and should not attempt the test again without a formal assessment. Option C. Conduct a full, standardized on-road assessment that covers all required driving competencies as outlined in the Newfoundland and Labrador Driver's Handbook, regardless of the student's anxiety level, and implement strategies to help manage the student's anxiety during the evaluation. Option D. Proceed with a shortened assessment, focusing only on basic maneuvers, and document that the student was anxious, implying this justifies the abbreviated evaluation. Correct answer is C. Conduct a full, standardized on-road assessment that covers all required driving competencies as outlined in the Newfoundland and Labrador Driver's Handbook, regardless of the student's anxiety level, and implement strategies to help manage the student's anxiety during the evaluation. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a driving instructor in Newfoundland and Labrador because it requires balancing the immediate need to assess a student's driving skills with the paramount responsibility of ensuring public safety and adherence to the provincial licensing regulations. The instructor must make a judgment call that could impact the student's progress and potentially the safety of others on the road, all while operating within the strict guidelines set by the Newfoundland and Labrador Department of Transportation and Works. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a thorough, on-road assessment that directly evaluates the student's ability to safely operate a vehicle in typical driving conditions, as mandated by the Newfoundland and Labrador Driver's Handbook and the requirements for obtaining a driver's license. This approach involves observing the student's execution of essential driving maneuvers, their understanding of traffic laws, and their ability to react appropriately to various road situations. The instructor must ensure the assessment covers all critical competencies outlined in the provincial testing standards, such as speed control, lane changes, turning, observation, and hazard perception. This aligns with the ethical obligation to certify only competent drivers and the regulatory requirement to pass a standardized road test. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach involves prioritizing the student's perceived readiness based on classroom performance or a brief demonstration in a controlled environment. This fails to meet the regulatory requirement for a comprehensive on-road assessment and bypasses the critical evaluation of the student's ability to handle real-world driving complexities, thereby compromising public safety. Another unacceptable approach is to proceed with the assessment, despite observing significant and repeated errors that indicate a lack of fundamental driving skills. This demonstrates a failure to uphold the instructor's duty of care and a disregard for the licensing standards designed to protect all road users in Newfoundland and Labrador. It also risks issuing a certification to an individual who is not yet safe to drive independently. A further incorrect approach would be to modify the assessment criteria to accommodate the student's perceived limitations or to rush through the evaluation to meet a schedule. This undermines the integrity of the licensing process and fails to provide an objective measure of the student's competence as required by the provincial authorities. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this field must adopt a decision-making framework that prioritizes safety and regulatory compliance above all else. This involves 1. Clearly understanding the specific requirements and standards set by the Newfoundland and Labrador Department of Transportation and Works for driver licensing. 2. Conducting a comprehensive and objective assessment of all required driving competencies. 3. Making an impartial judgment based on observed performance against these standards, not on personal feelings or external pressures. 4. Recognizing that the ultimate goal is to ensure only safe and competent drivers are licensed, thereby protecting the public. Question 7. The control framework reveals that as you approach a busy intersection in St. John's, Newfoundland and Labrador, you observe a pedestrian looking at their phone near the curb, a cyclist slightly ahead of you in the bike lane, and a car in the adjacent lane signaling a right turn. What is the most prudent approach to ensure the safety of yourself and others? Option A. Continue at your current speed, assuming the pedestrian will wait for traffic and the cyclist will maintain their course. Option B. Maintain a steady speed, actively scanning the pedestrian, cyclist, and turning vehicle, preparing to adjust your speed or position if any of them make an unexpected move. Option C. Slow down significantly to give the turning car ample space, even if it means impeding traffic behind you. Option D. Focus primarily on the car signaling the right turn, as it represents the most immediate potential conflict. The correct answer is B. Maintain a steady speed, actively scanning the pedestrian, cyclist, and turning vehicle, preparing to adjust your speed or position if any of them make an unexpected move. Explanation. The control framework reveals a situation where a driver's understanding of road safety principles is being assessed, specifically concerning their ability to anticipate and react to potential hazards. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the driver to move beyond simply following explicit instructions and instead engage in proactive risk assessment, a core competency for safe driving in Newfoundland and Labrador. The driver must demonstrate an understanding of how their actions, and the actions of others, can impact the overall safety of the road environment. The best approach involves a comprehensive assessment of the immediate traffic situation, considering potential hazards that are not yet fully materialized, but are reasonably foreseeable. This includes observing other vehicles, pedestrians, cyclists, and road conditions, and then making a judgment about how these elements might interact to create a risk. This proactive stance is aligned with the principles of defensive driving, which are implicitly and explicitly encouraged by the Newfoundland and Labrador driver licensing regulations. These regulations emphasize the driver's responsibility to operate their vehicle in a manner that ensures the safety of themselves and others, which necessitates anticipating and mitigating potential dangers. An incorrect approach would be to solely focus on the immediate, obvious elements of the road ahead, ignoring subtle cues or potential developments. This reactive approach fails to meet the standard of responsible driving expected under Newfoundland and Labrador law, as it leaves the driver unprepared for unexpected events. Another incorrect approach is to prioritize personal convenience or speed over a thorough assessment of the environment. This demonstrates a disregard for the safety of other road users and a failure to adhere to the fundamental duty of care required of all licensed drivers. Finally, an approach that relies solely on the actions of other drivers to dictate one's own actions is also flawed, as it abdicates personal responsibility for safe operation and fails to account for the unpredictable nature of human behavior on the road. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes situational awareness, risk identification, and proactive mitigation. This involves continuously scanning the environment, interpreting observed information, and making informed decisions to maintain a safe margin of error. The goal is to anticipate potential conflicts and take preventative action before a hazardous situation fully develops, thereby demonstrating a commitment to the safety standards mandated by Newfoundland and Labrador's road safety legislation. Question 8. Process analysis reveals a driving instructor in Newfoundland and Labrador has been working with a student who is very eager to take their road test. The student expresses high confidence in their abilities and frequently asks to be scheduled for the test, stating they feel ready. However, during recent practice sessions, the instructor has observed recurring minor errors in hazard perception and inconsistent application of defensive driving techniques, which are crucial components of the Newfoundland and Labrador driver examination standards. Considering the instructor's professional obligations and the provincial licensing framework, what is the most appropriate course of action? Option A. Schedule the student for the road test as requested, given their expressed confidence and repeated requests to allow them to gain experience in the testing environment. Option B. Advise the student to focus their remaining practice time on the specific maneuvers they anticipate will be heavily weighted on the road test to maximize their chances of passing. Option C. Conduct a final, comprehensive assessment of the student's driving skills against the official Newfoundland and Labrador driver examination standards and recommend them for the road test only if they consistently meet or exceed all criteria. Option D. Agree to accompany the student during the road test and provide subtle cues or assistance if they appear to be struggling with a particular task. The correct answer is C. Conduct a final, comprehensive assessment of the student's driving skills against the official Newfoundland and Labrador driver examination standards and recommend them for the road test only if they consistently meet or exceed all criteria. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a driving instructor in Newfoundland and Labrador who is tasked with assessing a student's readiness for the road test. The challenge lies in balancing the student's eagerness to pass with the instructor's ethical and legal responsibility to ensure public safety. A driving instructor must exercise sound judgment, recognizing that a student's subjective perception of their readiness may not align with objective safety standards and the requirements of the Newfoundland and Labrador road test regulations. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a thorough, objective assessment of the student's driving skills against the official Newfoundland and Labrador driver examination standards. This approach prioritizes safety and adherence to regulatory requirements. The instructor must meticulously evaluate the student's performance in all assessed areas, including hazard perception, vehicle control, adherence to traffic laws, and defensive driving techniques, as outlined by the provincial licensing authority. If the student demonstrates proficiency and consistently meets or exceeds these standards, the instructor can confidently recommend them for the road test. This aligns with the ethical obligation to protect other road users and the legal requirement to only endorse candidates who are demonstrably competent. Correct approach is analysis. Recommending the student for the road test solely based on their expressed confidence and repeated requests, despite the instructor's reservations about their actual skill level, represents a failure to uphold professional responsibility. This approach disregards the objective assessment criteria mandated by Newfoundland and Labrador's road test regulations and prioritizes the student's immediate desire over public safety. It is ethically unsound and could lead to an unsafe driver being licensed. Suggesting the student focus only on the specific maneuvers they believe will be tested, while neglecting other critical driving skills, is also professionally unacceptable. The Newfoundland and Labrador road test assesses a comprehensive range of driving competencies, not just isolated skills. This approach creates a false sense of preparedness and fails to equip the student with the holistic defensive driving abilities necessary for safe operation of a vehicle in all conditions. It also circumvents the spirit and intent of the provincial licensing requirements. Allowing the student to take the road test with the understanding that the instructor will subtly intervene or provide guidance during the test is a severe ethical and regulatory breach. The road test is designed to be an independent assessment of the applicant's abilities. Any form of instructor intervention compromises the integrity of the examination process and violates the rules set forth by the Newfoundland and Labrador Licensing Authority. This approach demonstrates a lack of integrity and a disregard for fair assessment. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this field should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a clear understanding of the governing regulations and ethical standards. This involves 1. Identifying the core objectives: safe and competent driving. 2. Gathering objective data performance during practice sessions against established criteria. 3. Evaluating this data against regulatory requirements. 4. Considering potential risks and consequences of a premature recommendation. And 5. Making a decision based on objective evidence and professional judgment, prioritizing public safety above all else. Question 9. System analysis indicates that a driving instructor in Newfoundland and Labrador is evaluating a student who demonstrates good vehicle control and successfully completes most required maneuvers during a practice test. However, the student occasionally makes minor errors, such as a slightly late observation before changing lanes or a brief hesitation at a yield sign. Considering the Newfoundland and Labrador Highway Traffic Act and its associated regulations, which approach best reflects the professional and regulatory obligations of the instructor in assessing the student's readiness for their driver's test. Option A. Overlook minor errors if the student demonstrates overall competence and good vehicle control, focusing primarily on their ability to complete the core driving maneuvers successfully. Option B. Allow personal judgment and consideration for the student's eagerness to pass to influence the assessment, potentially downplaying the significance of observed errors. Option C. Prioritize assessing the student's ability to complete the required maneuvers, with less emphasis on their adherence to traffic laws and defensive driving principles, as long as they are not causing immediate danger. Option D. Conduct a thorough and objective assessment, meticulously documenting all errors, including minor ones, and providing detailed feedback that explains how each error relates to safe driving practices and provincial licensing requirements. The correct answer is D. Conduct a thorough and objective assessment, meticulously documenting all errors, including minor ones, and providing detailed feedback that explains how each error relates to safe driving practices and provincial licensing requirements. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a driving instructor in Newfoundland and Labrador because it requires balancing the immediate need to assess a student's driving skills with the paramount responsibility of ensuring public safety and adhering to the provincial licensing regulations. The instructor must make a judgment call that could impact the student's progression towards a license, while also upholding the integrity of the testing process and the safety of other road users. The pressure to pass a student, especially if they are eager or have invested significant time and money, can create a conflict with the objective assessment required by the Newfoundland and Labrador Highway Traffic Act and its associated regulations. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a thorough, objective assessment of the student's ability to safely operate a vehicle in various driving conditions, strictly adhering to the standards outlined in the Newfoundland and Labrador Highway Traffic Act and the Official Driver's Handbook. This means identifying and documenting all errors, regardless of their perceived severity or the student's perceived readiness. The instructor must then provide clear, constructive feedback based on these observations, explaining how each error relates to safe driving practices and the requirements for passing the test. This approach ensures that the assessment is fair, transparent, and aligned with the provincial licensing objectives, which prioritize road safety above all else. It also provides the student with a clear understanding of their strengths and weaknesses, guiding their future practice. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach involves overlooking minor errors or downplaying their significance, because the student appears generally competent or has demonstrated good control in most situations. This fails to meet the regulatory requirement for a comprehensive assessment of all driving skills. The Newfoundland and Labrador Highway Traffic Act mandates that all driving maneuvers be evaluated against established safety standards. Ignoring errors, even minor ones, can lead to a student being licensed without possessing the full range of skills necessary for safe operation, potentially endangering themselves and others. This also undermines the credibility of the licensing process. Another incorrect approach is to focus solely on the student's ability to complete the required maneuvers without adequately assessing their adherence to traffic laws and defensive driving principles. For instance, a student might successfully navigate a parallel park, but fail to check blind spots or yield appropriately at an intersection. The Newfoundland and Labrador Highway Traffic Act and its regulations emphasize not just the mechanical execution of driving tasks, but also the driver's awareness, judgment, and respect for traffic laws. A failure to assess these broader aspects of safe driving is a significant regulatory and ethical lapse. A third incorrect approach is to allow personal feelings or external pressures, such as the student's anxiety or the instructor's desire to see them succeed, to influence the assessment outcome. This compromises the objectivity required by the licensing authority. The assessment must be based solely on the student's performance against the established criteria, as defined by Newfoundland and Labrador's driving regulations. Allowing personal bias to affect the evaluation is unprofessional and can lead to unqualified individuals obtaining driver's licenses, which is contrary to the public safety mandate of the licensing system. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this role should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes objective evaluation against established provincial standards. This involves 1. Understanding and internalizing the specific requirements of the Newfoundland and Labrador Highway Traffic Act and its associated regulations for driver licensing. 2. Conducting a systematic and comprehensive assessment of all required driving skills and knowledge. 3. Documenting all observations, both positive and negative, with specific reference to how they align with or deviate from the provincial standards. 4. Providing clear, unbiased feedback to the student, explaining the rationale behind the assessment outcome based on the observed performance and regulatory requirements. 5. Maintaining professional integrity by resisting external pressures or personal biases that could compromise the fairness and accuracy of the evaluation. Question 10. Governance review demonstrates that a car dealership in St. John's, Newfoundland and Labrador has been reporting the fuel efficiency of a new vehicle model. The vehicle's manufacturer provided the following figures: 25 miles per gallon (mpg) for city driving and 32 mpg for highway driving, to comply with provincial reporting standards for vehicle sales. What is the most accurate representation of the vehicle's average fuel consumption in liters per 100 kilometers, L/100 km, assuming the standard harmonic mean calculation for combined fuel economy is required? Option A, approximately 8.0 L/100 km. Option B, approximately 7.3 L/100 km. Option C, approximately 7.0 L/100 km. Option D, approximately 7.6 L/100 km. The correct answer is A, approximately 8.0 L/100 km. Explanation: Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge in accurately calculating and reporting fuel efficiency data, which directly impacts consumer information and regulatory compliance in Newfoundland and Labrador. Misrepresenting fuel efficiency can lead to consumer deception, potential fines, and damage to the dealership's reputation. The need for precise mathematical application and adherence to provincial guidelines for vehicle sales is paramount. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves meticulously calculating the average fuel consumption based on the provided city and highway mileage figures, then converting this to a standardized format for reporting as required by Newfoundland and Labrador's consumer protection regulations for vehicle sales. This approach ensures transparency and accuracy, directly aligning with the ethical obligation to provide truthful information to consumers and the legal requirement to comply with provincial advertising standards. The calculation would involve average fuel consumption, L/100 km, equals 1/city mpg *1, 60,934/100 plus highway mpg *1, 60,934/100 *100, where mpg is converted to km/L first. Alternatively, and more commonly for reporting, average fuel consumption L/100 km equals 2/1/city mpg *0, 425,144, plus 1/highway mpg *0, 425,144. This method provides a weighted average that is a standard in the industry and likely aligns with provincial reporting requirements for fuel efficiency. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves simply averaging the city and highway mpg values and then converting that single average to L/100 km. This method fails to account for the different driving conditions and their respective fuel consumption rates, leading to an inaccurate representation of the vehicle's overall fuel efficiency. This violates the principle of providing accurate information and potentially contravenes provincial regulations that mandate specific calculation methods for fuel economy reporting. Another incorrect approach is to report only the city or highway MPG figure without any calculation or averaging. This is fundamentally flawed as it provides incomplete and misleading information. Consumers rely on a representative fuel efficiency figure, and presenting only one extreme value does not meet this expectation and is a clear breach of consumer protection laws in Newfoundland and Labrador. A further incorrect approach is to use a simplified conversion factor without considering the nuances of the MPG to L/100 km conversion, or to round the final figure excessively without justification. This can lead to significant inaccuracies, especially when dealing with different units, and the need for precise reporting, as mandated by provincial consumer protection standards. Professional reasoning. Professionals in Newfoundland and Labrador must adopt a systematic approach to calculating and reporting vehicle fuel efficiency. This involves understanding the specific regulatory requirements for vehicle sales and advertising within the province. When faced with data like city and highway MPG, the professional decision-making process should prioritize accuracy and transparency. This means identifying the correct formula for calculating an average fuel consumption that meets provincial standards, performing the calculation with precision, and then presenting the result in the required format. If there is any ambiguity regarding the exact calculation method or reporting format, consulting the relevant provincial guidelines or seeking clarification from regulatory bodies is a crucial step in ensuring compliance and upholding professional integrity. Question 11. Strategic planning requires a driver in Newfoundland and Labrador to anticipate potential hazards on the road. Which of the following best describes the most effective approach to managing these anticipated risks? Option A. Reacting to immediate driving events only when they directly impact the vehicle's path. Option B. Actively scanning the driving environment for potential hazards and making proactive decisions to avoid them. Option C. Prioritizing speed and efficient travel over maintaining safe distances and courteous maneuvers. Option D. Assuming all other road users will consistently adhere to traffic laws and predictable behavior. The correct answer is B. Actively scanning the driving environment for potential hazards and making proactive decisions to avoid them. Explanation. The scenario presents a professional challenge for a driver applicant in Newfoundland and Labrador who is seeking to obtain their driver's license. The challenge lies in understanding and correctly applying the principles of defensive driving, specifically in the context of anticipating and mitigating potential hazards, which is a core component of road safety regulations in Newfoundland and Labrador. Careful judgment is required to differentiate between reactive driving and proactive, safety-conscious driving. The best approach involves actively scanning the environment for potential hazards and making informed decisions to avoid them. This proactive stance aligns directly with the spirit and intent of the Newfoundland and Labrador Highway Traffic Act and its associated regulations concerning safe driving practices. By continuously assessing the driving environment, including road conditions, other road users, and potential changes in traffic flow, an applicant demonstrates an understanding of their responsibility to operate a vehicle safely and prevent accidents. This approach prioritizes the safety of oneself and others, which is the paramount ethical and legal obligation of any driver. An incorrect approach would be to focus solely on reacting to immediate events. This might involve only braking when another vehicle suddenly cuts in front, or only steering to avoid an obstacle once it is directly in the path. This reactive strategy fails to meet the standard of defensive driving expected under Newfoundland and Labrador law, which emphasizes anticipation and prevention. Such a failure to scan and anticipate could be considered a breach of the duty of care owed to other road users, potentially leading to violations of traffic safety regulation. Another incorrect approach would be to prioritize speed and efficiency over safety. This could manifest as tailgating to make better time or aggressively maneuvering through traffic. This disregard for safe following distances and courteous driving is contrary to the principles of responsible operation of a motor vehicle as outlined in provincial legislation, and is ethically unacceptable due to the increased risk it poses to all road users. Finally, an incorrect approach would be to assume other drivers will always follow the rules of the road. While adherence to traffic laws is expected, a safe driver must always be prepared for the unexpected actions of others. Relying on the assumption that other drivers will be predictable and law-abiding is a dangerous oversight and a failure to implement a comprehensive defensive driving strategy, which is a cornerstone of safe operation on Newfoundland and Labrador roads. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the legal and ethical obligations of safe driving, as defined by the Newfoundland and Labrador Highway Traffic Act. This involves a continuous cycle of observation, anticipation, and action, always prioritizing hazard identification and mitigation. When faced with a driving situation, the professional should ask, what are the potential risks in this environment, and what proactive steps can I take to ensure the safety of myself and others? Question 12. The assessment process reveals that, while navigating a residential street in St. John's, Newfoundland and Labrador, a driver approaches an intersection marked with a stop sign. The driver significantly reduces their speed but does not bring the vehicle to a complete standstill before crossing the intersection. Which of the following demonstrates the most appropriate understanding of the driver's obligation? Option A. The driver's action of slowing down is sufficient as long as they are cautious when proceeding through the intersection. Option B. The driver is only required to slow down considerably at a stop sign to ensure they can react to any immediate hazards. Option C. The driver is required to bring the vehicle to a complete stop at the stop line or before entering the intersection, and then yield to all other traffic and pedestrians before proceeding. Option D. The driver is permitted to proceed through the intersection if no other vehicles are immediately visible, even without a full stop. The correct answer is C. The driver is required to bring the vehicle to a complete stop at the stop line or before entering the intersection, and then yield to all other traffic and pedestrians before proceeding. Explanation. The assessment process reveals a common challenge for new drivers in Newfoundland and Labrador: understanding the nuances of road signage and their immediate implications for safe driving. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the examiner to assess not just rote memorization of signs, but the driver's ability to interpret and react appropriately in a dynamic driving environment. A driver's failure to correctly interpret a sign can lead to immediate safety risks, including collisions, traffic violations, and potential harm to themselves and others. Therefore, careful judgment is required to distinguish between minor hesitations and critical misunderstandings of traffic laws. The best approach involves demonstrating a clear understanding of the regulatory requirement to obey all posted traffic signs and signals, as mandated by the Highway Traffic Act of Newfoundland and Labrador. This includes recognizing the sign's meaning and immediately adjusting driving behavior accordingly. For instance, encountering a stop sign requires a complete cessation of movement at the marked stop line or before entering the intersection, followed by yielding to all other traffic and pedestrians before proceeding. This approach is correct because it directly aligns with the legal obligation to operate a vehicle safely and in accordance with traffic control devices, ensuring the protection of all road users. An incorrect approach would be to acknowledge the stop sign but proceed without coming to a complete halt, perhaps by slowing down significantly. This demonstrates a failure to comply with the explicit instruction of the sign, violating Section 49 of the Highway Traffic Act, which mandates stopping at a stop sign. Another incorrect approach would be to stop, but then proceed without checking for oncoming traffic or pedestrians, which violates the fundamental principle of yielding the right-of-way and the implicit safety requirement associated with stopping at a stop sign. Finally, ignoring the stop sign altogether and proceeding through the intersection is a direct and dangerous violation of traffic law and poses an immediate risk of collision. Professionals should use a decision-making framework that prioritizes safety and adherence to the law. This involves first identifying the specific traffic control device encountered, understanding its precise meaning according to the Newfoundland and Labrador Highway Traffic Act and its regulations, and then evaluating the driver's immediate reaction against these requirements. If the driver's action deviates from the legally mandated behavior, it indicates a deficiency in their understanding or application of traffic laws, necessitating further assessment or failure of the test. Question 13. Operational review demonstrates that a driver operating a commercial vehicle in Newfoundland and Labrador has reported a noticeable looseness in the steering mechanism during a routine pre-trip inspection. The driver is under pressure to complete a delivery within a tight deadline. Considering the Highway Traffic Act of Newfoundland and Labrador, which of the following actions best upholds the driver's legal and professional responsibilities? Option A. Proceed with the delivery, assuming the steering looseness is minor and will not significantly impact driving safety for the remainder of the trip. Option B. Attempt a temporary roadside adjustment to the steering system to mitigate the looseness, and then continue the delivery. Option C. Contact dispatch to request permission to continue, explaining the time pressure and the perceived minor nature of the steering issue. Option D. Halt operations immediately and arrange for a qualified mechanic to inspect and repair the steering issue before continuing the journey. The correct answer is D. Halt operations immediately and arrange for a qualified mechanic to inspect and repair the steering issue before continuing the journey. Question 14. Quality control measures reveal that a new applicant for a driver's license in Newfoundland and Labrador is inquiring about receiving their license immediately, stating they have extensive driving experience in another country and believe they are fully capable of driving on Newfoundland and Labrador roads without undergoing the standard road test. What is the most appropriate response for the licensing officer to provide? Option A. Advise the applicant that there might be ways to expedite the licensing process through informal channels. Option B. Politely explain that all applicants must successfully pass the required road test as mandated by the Highway Traffic Act of Newfoundland and Labrador to obtain a driver's license, regardless of prior experience. Option C. Inform the applicant that their request cannot be accommodated and dismiss them without further explanation. Option D. Issue a temporary driving permit to the applicant, while their request for an exemption from the road test is reviewed by a supervisor. The correct answer is B. Politely explain that all applicants must successfully pass the required road test as mandated by the Highway Traffic Act of Newfoundland and Labrador to obtain a driver's license, regardless of prior experience. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the immediate need for a driver's license with the legal and safety requirements mandated by Newfoundland and Labrador's Highway Traffic Act. The applicant's eagerness, coupled with a potential misunderstanding of the licensing process, necessitates a careful and compliant response from the licensing officer. Failure to adhere to the established procedures could lead to an improperly licensed driver on the road, compromising public safety and violating regulatory standards. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves clearly and politely informing the applicant about the mandatory requirements for obtaining a driver's license in Newfoundland and Labrador, specifically referencing the need to pass the required road test. This approach directly addresses the applicant's request while upholding the law. The Highway Traffic Act of Newfoundland and Labrador outlines the graduated licensing system, which includes specific stages and examinations that must be successfully completed before a full driver's license is issued. By explaining these requirements, the officer ensures compliance with provincial legislation and promotes road safety. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves issuing a temporary permit without the applicant having completed the necessary road test. This is a direct violation of the Highway Traffic Act, which stipulates that a road test must be passed to progress through the licensing stages. Issuing a permit under these circumstances circumvents the safety assessment designed to ensure the applicant is competent to drive. Another incorrect approach is to dismiss the applicant's request without providing any explanation of the licensing process. This is unprofessional and unhelpful. While not a direct legal violation in itself, it fails to educate the applicant on the correct procedures and could lead to further confusion or attempts to bypass regulations. It also misses an opportunity to reinforce the importance of the licensing requirements. A further incorrect approach is to suggest that the applicant might be able to obtain a license through unofficial means or by circumventing the standard testing procedures. This is highly unethical and illegal. It undermines the integrity of the licensing system, endangers public safety, and could have severe legal repercussions for both the applicant and the licensing officer. Professional reasoning. Professionals in licensing roles should always prioritize adherence to the governing legislation. In this case, the Highway Traffic Act of Newfoundland and Labrador. When faced with an applicant seeking to obtain a license, the decision-making process should involve 1. Understanding the applicant's request. 2. Recalling the specific legal requirements for that request within the jurisdiction. 3. Communicating those requirements clearly and professionally to the applicant. And 4. Ensuring all actions taken are in strict compliance with the law and ethical standards. If there is any doubt about the process or requirements, consulting official guidelines or supervisors is paramount. Question 15. The risk matrix shows a moderate likelihood of a collision at a specific intersection in St. John's, Newfoundland and Labrador, due to a combination of poor visibility and high traffic volume during peak hours. Considering the principles of safe driving and the Newfoundland and Labrador Highway Traffic Act, what is the most appropriate driver response when approaching this intersection? Option A. Come to a complete stop before the intersection and wait for a significant gap in traffic before proceeding. Option B. Reduce speed significantly, scan thoroughly for all road users, and be prepared to stop before proceeding cautiously, even with the right-of-way. Option C. Proceed through the intersection at the posted speed limit, relying on the right-of-way to ensure safe passage. Option D. Accelerate through the intersection quickly to clear it before other vehicles arrive. Correct answer is B. Reduce speed significantly, scan thoroughly for all road users, and be prepared to stop before proceeding cautiously, even with the right-of-way. Explanation. The risk matrix shows a moderate likelihood of a collision at a specific intersection in St. John's, Newfoundland and Labrador, due to a combination of poor visibility and high traffic volume during peak hours. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a driver to balance adherence to traffic laws with proactive safety measures, especially when faced with conditions that elevate risk beyond the norm. The driver must make a judgment call that prioritizes safety without unnecessarily impeding traffic flow or violating any regulations. The best approach involves a driver actively assessing the intersection's conditions and adjusting their driving behavior accordingly. This means slowing down significantly, being prepared to stop, and scanning thoroughly for pedestrians, cyclists, and other vehicles before proceeding, even if they have the right-of-way. This proactive stance aligns with the fundamental principles of safe driving and the overarching goal of the Newfoundland and Labrador Highway Traffic Act, which emphasizes operating a vehicle in a safe and responsible manner to prevent accidents. This approach demonstrates a commitment to due diligence and a recognition that traffic laws are minimum standards, not absolute guarantees of safety in all circumstances. An incorrect approach would be to proceed through the intersection at the posted speed limit, relying solely on the right-of-way. This fails to acknowledge the elevated risk indicated by the poor visibility and high traffic volume, potentially violating the duty of care expected of all drivers to operate their vehicles safely. Another incorrect approach would be to come to a complete stop before the intersection, regardless of traffic conditions, which could impede the flow of traffic and potentially create a hazard for following vehicles, also demonstrating poor judgment and an unnecessary disruption to traffic. Finally, an approach that involves aggressive maneuvering to quickly clear the intersection, such as accelerating rapidly, directly contradicts the need for caution in a high-risk situation and significantly increases the likelihood of a collision, demonstrating a disregard for safety and potentially violating safe driving practices. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a thorough assessment of the immediate environment and potential hazards. This involves recognizing deviations from normal conditions, such as reduced visibility or increased traffic density. The next step is to consider the potential consequences of these deviations and to select a course of action that mitigates risk while remaining compliant with all applicable laws and regulations. This framework emphasizes anticipation, adaptation, and a commitment to the safety of oneself and others on the road. Question 16. The evaluation methodology shows a situation where a commercial driver operating a vehicle under the Newfoundland and Labrador Highway Traffic Act exhibits clear signs of potential impairment, e.g., slurred speech, unsteady gait, immediately before a critical delivery. The driver insists they are fit to drive and that delaying the delivery would have significant financial consequences for their employer. What is the most appropriate course of action? Option A. Trust the driver's assertion that they are fit to drive, given the critical nature of the delivery and the potential financial repercussions of a delay. Option B. Advise the driver to take a short break and see if their symptoms improve before making a decision on whether they can drive. Option C. Allow the driver to proceed with the delivery, but instruct them to report for a medical evaluation immediately after completing their route. Option D. Immediately stop the driver from operating the vehicle and follow established procedures for reporting suspected impairment to the appropriate authorities, regardless of the delivery's urgency. Correct answer is D. Immediately stop the driver from operating the vehicle and follow established procedures for reporting suspected impairment to the appropriate authorities, regardless of the delivery's urgency. Explanation. The evaluation methodology shows a scenario that is professionally challenging due to the inherent conflict between immediate operational needs and the long-term safety implications of a driver's behavior. A driver's ability to operate a vehicle safely is paramount, and any indication of impairment or risk requires immediate and decisive action, even if it disrupts immediate operational goals. The Newfoundland and Labrador Highway Traffic Act and associated regulations place a strong emphasis on driver responsibility and the prevention of impaired driving. The correct approach involves prioritizing immediate safety and adhering strictly to the legal and ethical obligations of reporting potential impairment. This means stopping the vehicle and taking appropriate action to ensure the safety of the driver, other road users, and the public. This aligns with the core principles of road safety legislation in Newfoundland and Labrador, which mandates that individuals do not operate vehicles while impaired, and that any observed impairment should be addressed. The ethical imperative to prevent harm and uphold the law is the primary consideration. An incorrect approach would be to overlook or downplay the observed behavior due to the driver's position or the urgency of their task. This fails to acknowledge the serious risks associated with impaired driving and directly contravenes the spirit and letter of the Highway Traffic Act. Another incorrect approach would be to rely solely on the driver's self-assessment without independent verification or intervention, as this abdicates responsibility and could lead to a dangerous situation. Finally, suggesting a delayed or informal follow-up without immediate action is also unacceptable, as it allows a potentially impaired driver to continue operating a vehicle, creating an unacceptable risk to public safety. Professionals in this situation should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes safety and legal compliance. This involves 1. Recognizing and assessing potential risks based on observable behavior. 2. Understanding the legal and ethical obligations to act. 3. Taking immediate, decisive action to mitigate risk, which may involve stopping the operation of the vehicle. 4. Following established reporting procedures and cooperating with authorities. The focus must always be on preventing harm and upholding the law, regardless of operational pressures. Question 17. Analysis of a driver in Newfoundland and Labrador who has a diagnosed medical condition that could potentially affect their ability to safely operate a commercial vehicle, but has not yet disclosed this to the Registrar of Motor Vehicles, considering the driver is aware of the requirement to report such conditions. Which of the following approaches best reflects responsible and legally compliant action? Option A. The driver decides to wait and only disclose the condition if specifically questioned about it during the medical examination for the commercial license. Option B. The driver provides a brief, unverified summary of their condition to the registrar without any accompanying medical reports. Option C. The driver chooses not to disclose the condition at all, assuming it does not significantly impact their driving in their opinion. Option D. The driver immediately informs the Registrar of Motor Vehicles about their medical condition and provides all supporting medical documentation from their physician. Correct answer is D. The driver immediately informs the Registrar of Motor Vehicles about their medical condition and provides all supporting medical documentation from their physician. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a driver applying for a commercial vehicle license in Newfoundland and Labrador. The challenge lies in accurately assessing the impact of a previously undisclosed medical condition on their ability to safely operate a commercial vehicle, while also navigating the regulatory requirements for disclosure and assessment. The driver's attempt to downplay the condition creates an ethical dilemma regarding honesty and the paramount importance of public safety. Careful judgment is required to ensure compliance with the Newfoundland and Labrador Highway Traffic Act and its associated regulations concerning medical fitness to drive. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves the driver proactively and fully disclosing their medical condition to the Registrar of Motor Vehicles, along with providing all requested medical documentation from their physician. This approach aligns directly with Section 105 of the Newfoundland and Labrador Highway Traffic Act, which mandates that any person who has a physical or mental condition that may impair their ability to drive safely must notify the registrar. Full disclosure ensures that the registrar can conduct a proper assessment of the driver's fitness to operate a commercial vehicle, thereby upholding the public safety mandate of the legislation. This proactive and transparent approach prioritizes regulatory compliance and ethical responsibility. Incorrect approaches analysis. Failing to disclose the condition or providing incomplete information to the registrar is a direct violation of Section 105 of the Newfoundland and Labrador Highway Traffic Act. This failure to disclose prevents a proper assessment of the driver's fitness to drive, creating a significant risk to public safety. Ethically, it constitutes dishonesty and a disregard for the law. Attempting to obtain a commercial license by only disclosing the condition after being specifically asked during the medical examination, without prior proactive disclosure, is also problematic. While disclosure occurs, the lack of proactive reporting undermines the spirit of the law, which expects drivers with potentially impairing conditions to initiate the disclosure process. This approach suggests an intent to conceal information until absolutely necessary, which is not in line with the proactive safety measures required. Providing only a brief, unverified summary of the condition to the registrar without supporting medical documentation from a physician fails to meet the requirements for a comprehensive medical assessment. The registrar needs objective medical evidence to make an informed decision about the driver's fitness, as implied by the regulatory framework's emphasis on medical fitness. This approach is insufficient for regulatory compliance and public safety. Professional reasoning. Professionals in Newfoundland and Labrador, when faced with a situation involving a potentially impairing medical condition for a commercial driver's license, should follow a decision-making process that prioritizes transparency, regulatory compliance, and public safety. This involves 1. Identifying the relevant legislation. In this case, the Newfoundland and Labrador Highway Traffic Act and its regulations regarding medical fitness to drive. 2. Understanding the driver's obligation, recognizing the legal and ethical duty to disclose any condition that may affect driving ability. 3. Proactively gathering necessary documentation, obtaining medical reports from qualified physicians. 4. Submitting complete and accurate information to the registrar, ensuring all required forms and documentation are provided without delay. 5. Cooperating fully with any further assessment requests, working with the registrar to ensure a thorough evaluation of fitness to drive. Question 18. The review process indicates that a driver applicant in Newfoundland and Labrador has failed the road test on multiple occasions due to consistent difficulties with merging onto a highway. What is the most appropriate next step for the licensing examiner? Option A. Continue administering the standard road test as usual, assuming the applicant will eventually master the skill through repeated attempts. Option B. Refuse to retest the applicant until they can demonstrate proficiency in merging without any further assessment or guidance. Option C. Conduct a focused reassessment of the applicant's highway merging skills, potentially including brief clarification on techniques, followed by a retest specifically targeting this maneuver. Option D. Pass the applicant, acknowledging their persistence despite the documented merging errors. The correct answer is C. Conduct a focused reassessment of the applicant's highway merging skills, potentially including brief clarification on techniques, followed by a retest specifically targeting this maneuver. Explanation. The review process indicates a scenario where a driver applicant in Newfoundland and Labrador has consistently failed the road test due to specific recurring errors related to merging onto a highway. This situation is professionally challenging because it requires the examiner to balance the need to uphold safety standards with the applicant's right to demonstrate competency and potentially identify underlying issues beyond simple driving skill. Careful judgment is required to ensure the assessment is fair, objective, and aligned with the requirements of the Newfoundland and Labrador Highway Traffic Act and associated regulations. The best professional approach involves a thorough reevaluation of the applicant's performance, focusing on the specific areas of difficulty identified. This includes reviewing the examiner's notes from previous tests to pinpoint the exact nature of the merging errors. The examiner should then conduct a targeted assessment, potentially including a brief period of instruction or clarification on merging techniques, followed by a retest specifically focused on highway merging. This approach is correct because it directly addresses the applicant's demonstrated weakness in a safe and structured manner, adhering to the principles of fair assessment and the objective of ensuring drivers can operate vehicles safely on Newfoundland and Labrador roadways as mandated by the Highway Traffic Act. It prioritizes safety while providing the applicant with a reasonable opportunity to demonstrate improvement. An incorrect approach would be to simply continue administering the standard road test repeatedly without any modification or additional assessment, expecting the applicant to improve solely through repetition. This fails to acknowledge the applicant's persistent difficulty and may lead to unnecessary frustration and repeated failures, potentially violating the spirit of providing a fair assessment process. Another incorrect approach would be to pass the applicant despite the documented merging errors, compromising public safety and violating the examiner's duty to ensure all drivers meet the required competency standards outlined in the Highway Traffic Act. Finally, an approach that involves overly harsh or dismissive feedback or a refusal to reevaluate the applicant's skills in a structured way would be unprofessional and could be seen as discriminatory, failing to uphold the principles of objective evaluation. Professionals in this situation should employ a decision-making framework that begins with objective data collection, previous test results. This should be followed by an analysis of the root cause of the recurring errors. Based on this analysis, a tailored assessment or intervention should be considered, always prioritizing safety and fairness. The process should be documented meticulously, and communication with the applicant should be clear, constructive, and respectful, guiding them towards successful completion of the licensing requirements in Newfoundland and Labrador. Question 19. Performance analysis shows a driver in Newfoundland and Labrador receives a low fuel warning while navigating a moderately busy provincial highway. What is the most responsible course of action to ensure compliance with traffic safety regulations and prevent potential hazards? Option A. Speed up to reach the destination faster before the fuel runs out. Option B. Turn off the engine to conserve fuel and attempt to coast to the destination. Option C. Continue driving, hoping to reach the intended destination before the vehicle runs out of fuel. Option D. Immediately find a safe place to pull over and address the low fuel situation by refueling or seeking assistance. The correct answer is D. Immediately find a safe place to pull over and address the low fuel situation by refueling or seeking assistance. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a driver to balance immediate personal needs with the legal and safety obligations of operating a vehicle. The temptation to prioritize personal convenience over established traffic laws, especially when dealing with a minor inconvenience like a low fuel warning, can lead to unsafe driving practices and potential violations of the Newfoundland and Labrador Highway Traffic Act. Careful judgment is required to assess the risk associated with continuing to drive and to make a responsible decision that upholds public safety. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves immediately seeking a safe location to pull over and address the low fuel situation. This approach aligns with the fundamental principle of safe driving, which prioritizes avoiding situations that could compromise vehicle control or create hazards for other road users. Specifically, Section 46 of the Newfoundland and Labrador Highway Traffic Act, which addresses the offense of driving without due care and attention, implicitly covers situations where a driver's actions or inactions, such as failing to refuel, lead to a foreseeable risk of danger. Pulling over to refuel or seek assistance demonstrates a commitment to responsible vehicle operation and adherence to the spirit of traffic safety legislation, preventing a potential breakdown in an unsafe location. Incorrect approaches analysis. Continuing to drive with a low fuel warning, hoping to reach a destination without incident, is professionally unacceptable. This action disregards the potential for the vehicle to stall unexpectedly, which could lead to a sudden loss of power, steering, and braking capabilities. Such a stall could occur in a dangerous location, such as a highway intersection or a busy roadway, creating a significant hazard and potentially violating Section 46 of the Highway Traffic Act by driving without due care and attention. Furthermore, attempting to coast to a destination by turning off the engine is extremely dangerous and illegal, as it completely negates all safety systems and control mechanisms of the vehicle, directly contravening safe driving practices and the intent of traffic legislation. Ignoring the warning light and hoping for the best demonstrates a lack of foresight and a disregard for the safety of oneself and others. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a risk-based decision-making framework. This involves identifying potential hazards, low fuel leading to a stall, assessing the likelihood and severity of those hazards, high likelihood of stalling, severe consequences if it occurs in an unsafe location, and then taking proactive steps to mitigate those risks. In this case, the proactive step is to address the fuel issue immediately by pulling over safely, rather than gambling on the vehicle's performance and potentially creating a dangerous situation. This framework emphasizes prevention and responsible action over convenience and potential regret. Question 20. Compliance review shows that a Newfoundland and Labrador driver instructor is evaluating a learner's progress. The instructor has observed the learner make 4 minor errors and 2 major errors during a 45-minute lesson. If a minor error deducts 1 point from a potential perfect score of 100 and a major error deducts 5 points, what is the learner's current performance score for this lesson segment, assuming no other deductions? Option A, 98. Option B, 86. Option C, 95. Option D, 90. Correct answer is B, 86. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a Newfoundland and Labrador driver instructor who must accurately assess a learner's progress and provide feedback that aligns with the provincial licensing requirements. The challenge lies in translating observed driving performance into quantifiable metrics that can be used to determine readiness for the road test, while also ensuring the feedback is constructive and legally defensible. The instructor must balance the need for thoroughness with the practical constraints of lesson time and the learner's emotional state. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a systematic approach to evaluating the learner's performance against the official Newfoundland and Labrador driver's handbook criteria. This means breaking down the driving task into observable components, e.g., observation, signaling, speed control, lane changes, hazard perception, and assigning a numerical score or rating to each based on the frequency and severity of errors. For example, a simple scoring system could assign points for each minor infraction and a higher penalty for major infractions. The total score would then be compared against a predetermined passing threshold, which should be clearly communicated to the learner. This approach is correct because it directly reflects the standards set by the Newfoundland and Labrador Department of Transportation and Infrastructure for driver licensing, ensuring objectivity and fairness. It provides concrete data for feedback, allowing the learner to understand specific areas for improvement and the instructor to justify their assessment. Incorrect approach is analysis, an approach that relies solely on a general feeling of readiness without objective measurement is professionally unacceptable. This is because it lacks a quantifiable basis for assessment, making it subjective and prone to bias. It fails to provide the learner with specific, actionable feedback and does not align with the structured evaluation required by the provincial licensing body. An approach that focuses only on the number of lessons completed, irrespective of demonstrated skill, is also professionally flawed. The Newfoundland and Labrador driver's licensing process is skill-based, not time-based. Simply accumulating hours does not guarantee competence or safety on the road. This approach disregards the core purpose of driver training, which is to develop safe driving habits and skills. An approach that involves inflating the learner's score to make them feel more confident, even if their performance doesn't warrant it, is ethically and professionally unsound. This misrepresents the learner's actual skill level, potentially leading them to attempt the road test unprepared. This not only endangers the learner and other road users, but also undermines the integrity of the licensing system and the instructor's professional credibility. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this field should adopt a decision-making framework that prioritizes objective assessment, adherence to provincial standards, and transparent communication. This involves 1. Understanding the Newfoundland and Labrador driver's handbook and the specific criteria for passing the road test. 2. Developing or utilizing a standardized evaluation checklist or scoring system that quantifies performance across key driving competencies. 3. Conducting regular, objective assessments during lessons, documenting errors and their severity. 4. Calculating a performance score based on these assessments, using a consistent formula. For instance, if a minor error is assigned 1 point and a major error is assigned 5 points, and the learner makes 3 minor errors and 1 major error in a 30-minute lesson, their error score for that lesson would be /3 times 1 plus 1 times 5 equals 8 /. If the passing threshold for a lesson segment requires an error score below 10, this learner would be considered to have met the standard for that segment. 5. Clearly communicating the assessment results and the rationale behind them to the learner, highlighting areas for improvement. 6. Using this data to tailor future instruction and determine when the learner is truly ready for the official road test.